I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a drug?
He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top story. Thousands of firefighters are continuing to tackle the wildfires, which have devastated parts of Los Angeles, while police have issued a warning to looters that they'll face the full force of the law. 10 Reform UK councillors have quit the party in protest against the leadership of Nigel Farage. And Donald Trump has been spared jail today following his conviction in the Stormy Daniels case, but he'll be America's first ever convicted criminal to be sworn into office. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Deane. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, The Times leads with the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, defending her decision to hold talks with the Chinese government, saying the UK has, as she puts it, no choice at all but to engage with Beijing. The Eye reports that interest rates on mortgage deals could reach 5% in the coming weeks as Ms. Reeves faces pressure to get the economy under control. According to the Financial Times, part of that work will involve coming up with initiatives for growth that don't result in needing to increase taxes. According to the Mail, a pledge by the government to boost defence spending may not be actioned until the 2030s. The Telegraph hears that the UK is down to just 1 week's supply of gas reserves. The Mirror speaks to former Hull City footballer Dean Windass, who's been diagnosed with dementia at the age of 55. According to The Sun, an unnamed Premier League footballer has been arrested on his training pitch over allegations that he made a sex tape without consent. The Express is outraged that the England Cricket Board hasn't cancelled its team's scheduled match against Afghanistan, despite the Taliban saying it will no longer let the country's women's team play the sport. And The Star cites a study claiming that the secret to a happy life is to never put your full effort into anything. We tell you more, but apparently they have made the effort to send us the full story. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the program, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Alex Deane. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with the economy. It hasn't been a great week. Obviously, government borrowing to the highest levels, I think, in 16 years. Value of the pound has plummeted. And of course, the government has always said they're not going to put taxes up again. So let's look at what the FT is going with. They have a story about Labour lining up fresh drive to bolster growth. So, Alex, talk us through this.
Well, they need to do something, and one wants the government to do well. I was a Conservative candidate at the last election. I fought against them. They won. They have an absolute mandate to govern. They govern for our country. But this is really bad. I mean, the 10-year rate on gilts is at its highest for over a decade. The 30-year gilt rate, which is debt we pass on to children yet to be born, is higher than it's been since Tony Blair was in office in 1998. This is much higher rates of servicing our debt than Liz Truss saw. And Labour got into office in part by saying how much Liz Truss had so-called tanked the economy or crashed the economy. Well, this is, I'm afraid, Rachel Reeves crashing the economy. On any metric, it's worse than we've had it for several years now. We're paying more to service our debt than the Greeks do. That's the sort of thing that makes you sit up and realise where things have gone wrong. Interest rates we were expecting on all of the forecasts from last year to come down 3, maybe even 4 times this year. Most forecasters are now saying perhaps once. Business confidence down very significantly. As you point out, sterling down, but that worries me less. Currencies fluctuate. But if you check if your pension's invested in UK stock, as most people's are, and you check your pension pot on your app today, you're very likely to see the value of your pension's gone down. You've got a mortgage and you're going to have to remortgage soon. You'll find that the rates are going up. This is bad, especially in an environment where interest rates aren't coming down and inflation is going up. All round, very bad for the government. They have to try and stimulate things. And so Labour is driving up a fresh drive to bolster growth. And in the disarmingly honest line they've given to the FT, if something sounds like it's going to assist growth, we'll say yes.
Yeah, I mean, the markets have turned on the government, for absolute sure. These rates were going up by 0.1% every day this week, which was kind of terrifying. But I don't think... I mean, you're making it sound like a kind of individual consumer issue, but it's not really, is it? It's an issue... It's the... Basically, if the government's plan was to be very kind of mild, if you look at the last budget, it was pretty mild tax rises, mild increases.
£40 billion tax.
Hang on a second, stop talking when I'm talking. There was a very mild programme, economically speaking, and if that is... If the plan is to do that and borrow money, you need the money, you need the interest, you need the rates to be low. They can't do the plan with high rates. So whoever, you know, it is going to look like them either coming out and announcing a fresh raft of austerity, which you're completely right, after trashing trusts and then seeing higher rates and then promising not to do austerity, then coming out saying they were going to do more, is going to look absolutely appalling. But, on the other hand, you know, you can't just say growth 100 times and see growth. Somebody needs to say where the growth's coming from.
That we are seeing. But I think it's very difficult to claim this isn't an individual issue or a consumer issue.
Well, I mean,
when inflation is where it is and hiring has gone off a cliff, right? So we're seeing real growth in hiring rates in this country, and now we are not. And that's an individual issue, isn't it?
I'm not saying it's not going to touch individuals. I'm saying that the crisis in the government is going to be obvious before you see your pension pot go down, or before you worry about your pension pot.
I agree on the crisis in the government.
Let me just bring up another front page, which leads into it, because, Alex, you mentioned the rise or interest rates not being cut the way that we thought they were going to be cut. Front page there of the mortgage rate set to rise as Reeves faces crunch weeks on UK economy.
And the other thing that the eye reveals, this is when people start putting out their feelers for whether there might be significant movement in government. Unless Rachel Reeves can show her plan is working, Labour MPs, unnamed, brief the eye, Keir Starmer might have to make a decision. They mean that about the future of our Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. When people start making these kinds of comments, it's in part those in and around leadership testing what people think about such a thing. But it displays, I think, a willingness... For some time, Rachel Reeves' political instincts in opposition were part of what propelled Labour to government. She was seen as a solid performer. She was seen as an extremely successful person on the front bench. And I think this suggests she's no longer seen as quite the asset which she once was.
I mean, I'm surprised that they put that on the splash, to be honest, because when you've got unnamed MPs of unnamed provenance with an unnamed position and it's completely unclear whether it's a disgruntled backbencher or an actual cabinet minister, if I were the news editor, I wouldn't put it as a bullet point.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't have the same, no offence to you and your industry, we don't have the same editorial standards as, say, the American newspapers, which double source everything.
We do.
Well, OK, well then, but you're not suggesting that your peers and colleagues at the Eye are lying when they say Labour MPs plural.
I'm not saying they're lying. I'm saying it's just a little bit weak, you know. Is that 2 MPs and are they from nowhere and did they only just enter Parliament? Or is that 20 MPs and are they really important MPs and have they been in Parliament for a long time? It's like these are important distinctions and a lot of papers wouldn't have put that on the cover.
Main point being mortgage rates are going to go up. I think that's a consumer issue.
And while all of this is going on, of course, Rachel Reeves is in China. Let's look at the front page of The Times on Saturday. Reeves, UK needs China. Her quote, ignoring Beijing, no choice at all, says the Chancellor. She has been criticised, Zoe, hasn't she, for going at this point. Do you think she's right, both in going and saying that ignoring China is not an option? Well,
actually, having just slated the Eye, they do completely distill the dilemma she was in, which is that it does look strange because it's an incredibly... It's a time full of jeopardy, and she does look as though she doesn't realise how serious it is. At the same time, if she cancelled, that would have looked like she was panicking. So how on earth is a kind of mature and sensible Chancellor supposed to react like this?
I'm more sympathetic to her than you might have expected me to be. I think that your economics editor, Ed Conway's report on the importance of Chinese industry to the UK was very good, broadcast shortly before we came on air tonight. Clearly, a British Chancellor has to think about the growth of the Chinese economy and where we fit into it. And she probably should go and see the Chinese. The timing is really bad. Right? The timing is really unfortunate, especially when she didn't, for whatever reason, attend Parliament to answer the urgent question on the state of the economy only this week. And the Times also points out on its front that because we're not getting the second rate cut that we'd all expected on interest rates, 1.8 million people due to come off fixed-rate mortgages and who would be hoping for a lower mortgage rate won't be getting them.
OK. But so you think when she says no choice at all in engaging with Beijing,
yeah, I'm actually sympathetic to the Chancellor going to China. I think that our British Chancellor should prioritise our relationship with China. I just think when this kind of thing's playing out, the timing's really bad.
OK. Let's go to a different story, just moving away from the economy, but a story we've all been talking about for weeks now. Guardian, grooming gang rhetoric risks inciting massacre streeting. Now, obviously, we've seen a lot of very strong words on the whole issue of the grooming gangs and how it was or not dealt with properly. A lot of it coming from Elon Musk. But, Zoe, it's not just the Elon Musk comments that West Streeting is talking about.
No, West Streeting is talking about an overall febrile atmosphere, which you can see among numerous right-wing commentators on Twitter. You can see it from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition. You can see it from GB News. And indeed, the story was germinated in GB News rather than by Musk. Musk kind of picked it up on the kind of embers that had already been going. Now, the interesting thing about West Streeting's interview is that he seems to be trying to play both sides of the crowd. So he says the one thing which we lead on, which I agree with, that a lot of this rhetoric is going to incite massacre. But then earlier on in the piece, he says there was a huge amount of cowardice, which in failing to name the racial profile of the abusers. Now, that's like, I mean, what's extraordinary to me is that we covered this at the time when Jay's report came out and 4 years previous to that. And many of the officials who said it was because we were too careful over racial sensibilities, it was just because they weren't dealing with the issue well enough. So they used racial sensitivity as a fig leaf for their own incompetence and of a number of systemic failures, which were completely obvious. And I didn't see any right-wing commentator, any right-wing politician take any interest in the story at all 10 years ago when the report came out. So to have them now ask for another inquiry when there's an inquiry right in front of them detailing what happened.
But I guess West Streeting is more specifically focusing on the rhetoric around it and some of the language.
Is,
so, Alex, what do you make of that?
And so you don't think we should be talking about it?
It's not that we shouldn't be talking about it, it's that we should be detailing what actually happened. You know, what actually happened was this was a systemic failure by councils sending kids out of area to save money and stranding young people hundreds of miles from the people who knew them, where they were incredibly vulnerable.
No,
and then saying, which is the most outrageous thing, oh, we failed these girls by not talking about racial profiling enough. Now, all races are guilty of child abuse, as the Baroness J report found.
You don't think that noticing that there is a racial profile, if it's a lot of the grooming gangs, is even legitimate to...
It's not whether or not it's legitimate, it's just that isn't what would have solved the problem and that isn't what caused the problem. You know, the reason councils didn't deal with it well enough was not because they were scared of racial sensitivity, it's because they weren't dealing with it very well, and that was often because they were trying to save money.
When one council allowed a young victim to be adopted into the family of her rapist, and the council worker turned up to the so-called wedding, underage, you don't... That's not to do with the excuse or reason that you've just offered about moving people out of area.
No, it's not. But, you know, there were systemic council failures, and I think they were to do with cost-cutting and incompetence.
So we disagree about the West Streeting part. But anyway, go on.
Sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. Obviously, a hugely emotive issue. And this line in The Guardian is about the rhetoric, basically, and the kind of language, not so much the sort of issues, but the way it's discussed. So we're going to have to move on. Just now coming up, Britain's gas reserves are reportedly down to just a week's supply. Should we be concerned? We'll discuss that next.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
In the last 5 years, more than 13,000 farmers have left agriculture in the UK.
Is it going to be viable for the future?
No farmers, no food! The frustration, the anger, the fact that so many of them are at risk of going bust has now become too much.
You've got to keep hope because one day it's going to be okay.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
It's scary what's happening in the country.
It's the illegal migrants that we don't want here.
How difficult is this to police tonight?
Off the scale. Having the police speak to us so starkly right in the middle of the riot showed just how serious the situation was. The water on board the barge contaminated with Legionella bacteria, an outbreak that was first revealed by Sky News. There have been questions for months over whether the support offered to asylum seekers on the Bibby is sufficient.
A cruel place to put human beings.
From busy cities to rural communities, we spend every day reporting on how big decisions impact real people. The last smoke and steam rises into the sky above Blast Furnace 4.
Today is a day in history in Talbot.
The closure means more than 2,000 job losses.
It just seems madness.
It is a highly contagious infection. South West Water did apologise again.
This is the revenge porn helpline.
They're helping terrified victims.
You've been a victim of a very common type of online crime known as sextortion.
We're making things better for people.
Stonehenge became the latest victim of Just Stop Oil.
Now I can say I've been to the orange Stonehenge.
Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview, and I'm here with Zoe and Alex. Let's go straight to the Daily Telegraph. Quite a concerning story, considering how cold it's been, certainly the past week. 1 week's supply of gas left as cold bites is the headline. And what they're saying is the UK's storage sites are now only about half full. That's according to Centrica, and that's 26% lower than this time last year, Zoe.
And furthermore, the really chilling comparisons, if you'll accept the word, are with the rest of Europe, where it's typical to have between like 80 and 120 days storage. Now, the thing is, we always look bad when we put our gas storage in a list, because we never have, and we've always got a just-in-time supply market with gas. And that's been true for at least 10 years, if not longer. So there is a Labour spokesman saying this is Centrica just trying to put pressure on them, because it's exactly the right time to put pressure on the government to just loosen the purse strings with Centrica, because it's so cold that everybody looks at that and thinks, I don't want there to be a week, I want there to be 3 months. But, you know, I won't know until the gas comes off how
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
This
How
is.
worried should we be?
Very worried. We consciously chose to close the only really significant gas storage facility we have under the North Sea called Rough. That happens to also be a Centrica facility. We should be reopening it, and it's been open to about 1/5 of a percentage now, but that's more than double of our current capacity, and that's why we're so far behind. So we slightly disagree on the facts. I think we've quite recently become less strong in gas storage, and we can and should fix it.
OK. Let's move on to the Daily Express. Just want to get the story in front page. It's just not cricket to ban women. And this is England cricket chiefs basically urging people to do the right thing and boycott a match against Afghanistan in defiance to the Taliban that have banned women, not just from sport, but basically, apparently, from pretty much anything. Do you think there should be a boycott, Zoe?
I think it's actually other sporting giants pressurising cricket, because cricket has always been quite conservative in terms of not trying to keep it out of politics, which normally they get lucky on, right? They don't really have to make this call very often, but they don't want to make a call. They don't think they should get their hands dirty.
Zoe's right. The cricket board and players are intending to go ahead, and there's pressure on them from outside. I'm highly sympathetic to the suggestion that we shouldn't play countries like this that repress women in the way that the Taliban do.
So you think we should or shouldn't?
I'm highly sympathetic to those who say we should not enter into such matches. The trouble is, where do you go once you start down that road? Think about who's been hosting World Cups of late and who's going to be hosting World Cups in the football. Once you start that position, I'm afraid it won't end with cricket.
Well, I don't mind. I would be really happy to not play major tournaments in countries that are routinely homophobic and misogynistic. That is absolutely fine. But you're right, I don't watch that much cricket.
But you also say the Taliban is quite an extremist.
It's an appalling...
But I mean, compared even to other countries that are close to the
Of course, I'm highly sympathetic to anyone... It's a terrible shame. Shame is too weak a word, that Taliban have anything to do with anyone's governance. And the way that women have been repressed and people have basically turned a blind eye to the suffering in that country is appalling.
OK, we have time for just one last story. Daily Star, we're 100% certain you should never give 100%. So basically, we just not put any effort in anything. Zoe,
I think...
in 20 seconds, please.
You know, I'm actually surprised they ran with this, because it's basically just saying don't be a perfectionist, which we've known for ages.
I could have looked this up online, but I decided not to bother.
There you go. On that note, Alex, we're going to leave it there. I'll see you in the next hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, as devastating wildfires continue to burn, police in Los Angeles issue a stark warning to looters. We're going to have all the latest live from Los Angeles. Stay with us.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.